You know the story, right? July 1969, Neil Armstrong, one small step for man. It's a moment that's practically burned into our collective memory. But what if it all went the other way? What if the first flag planted on the moon wasn't the stars and stripes, but the hammer and sickle? Okay, let's dive into this because it's a fascinating alternate history. So here's how we're going to break this down. We'll start with that exact moment history changes. Then we'll feel the shock waves back on Earth. We'll see how it might have, weirdly enough, kicked our future into high gear. Then we'll get into the massive propaganda war that would follow. And finally, we'll ask what that one giant leap would have really meant for all of us. All right, let's get right into it. Picture the scene. The entire planet is holding its breath. Everyone is glued to their radios and TVs. But the voice that crackles through the speaker is not the one we remember. Just imagine hearing that crackle of static, the anticipation, and then those words echo back from the lunar surface. It's not a message for all mankind, is it? No, it's a partisan declaration. It's a state claimed for a political system. And in that single moment, the moon stops being a universal symbol and becomes conquer territory. Really think about that image, a cosmonaut, maybe Leonov, who was their guy for the Soviet lunar mission. He steps out onto the dust. He plants a deep crimson flag, and the hammer and sickle just pop against the absolute blackness of space. For millions, maybe billions of people watching around the world, that is undeniable proof of Soviet supremacy. So what happens next? What's the immediate aftermath? Because a red moon would cast a very, very long shadow back here on Earth. The political and psychological fallout would be just immense. The next morning's newspapers tell the whole story. In our world, the headline was universal, right? It was celebrating a human achievement. But in this alternate world, the headline is purely political. It highlights an ideological victory. It's not about humanity anymore. It's about which system is better. And that fallout would be immediate and profound. I mean, this is so much more than just a psychological blow to the US. It's seen as a failure of its entire system, capitalism, ingenuity, the whole shebang. You can see how these points just build on each other, creating this massive power shift in the Cold War and giving the Soviet Union a surge in global prestige it had only dreamed of. But here's the twist. A Soviet victory wouldn't have ended the space race, not even close. In fact, it might have just been the beginning, kicking off a future of exploration that moved even faster than our own. America wouldn't have just packed up and gone home. No way. Humiliated and politically cornered, Congress would have likely opened the floodgates for NASA funding. The Apollo program wouldn't wind down. The goal would shift dramatically. The Soviets have the moon? Fine. As this timeline suggests, the US would aim for a permanent lunar base and then set its sights on the next, even bigger prize, Mars. And this is where the irony really kicks in. This fierce, bitter competition becomes a powerful driver for innovation. In this alternate timeline, that constant one-upmanship could have actually put humanity on Mars by the 1990s. The Cold War in space wouldn't have ended. It would have just burned hotter and pushed us all farther, faster. But let's not forget, space was never just about science. It was the ultimate stage for the ideological battle between East and West. A red moon would have been the greatest propaganda victory in history. The propaganda basically writes itself. While news anchors in the West would be reeling, Soviet television would be broadcasting a simple, powerful message of victory. The image of the red flag on the moon becomes the ultimate proof of concept for their system, a symbol that would energize communist movements all over the globe and deeply undermine American claims of leadership. So let's bring this all together. You have two timelines, separated by one single event, and they lead to two very different visions of humanity's future in space. And it really all comes back to this. On the one hand, a message of universal achievement for our entire species. On the other, a triumph claimed for one political ideology. The very language they use reveals that deep philosophical divide of the Cold War and how it would have been projected out onto the cosmos. Which leaves us with a final, fascinating question. This alternate history suggests that intense rivalry could have pushed us to the stars faster. But our own timeline, with things like the International Space Station, points to the power of collaboration. So what truly drives us forward? A race against each other, or a journey we decide to take together?